นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ I pay my respects to all the Sangha members gathered here today and asked permission to speak on the Dhamma, and blessings to all of the lay devotees gathered here today. As you know, this is part of the Ajahn Chah Remembrance Day events, today and tomorrow, organised by the Katanyuta group, led by Brother Sian and many other volunteers and sponsors. You probably know the name Katanyuta group mostly from all the publications, all the good work that has been done, particularly printing Dhamma teachings of Luang Por Chah, our teacher, but also his students over the last many years. But this is a day or 2 days of practice. And this is in line with how our primary teacher, the Buddha, taught. When people were asking him how they should remember and honour the Buddha after he passed away, should they offer candles and incense and flowers? He didn't say don't do that, but he said what is better or more useful, more beneficial is to honour and remember the teacher through the practice. Putting the teachings that the Buddha gave and that we received, or the people of the time received, into practice. And I think that's similar for Luang Por Chah, our teacher, even though he's now been deceased for 33 odd years. The best way to honour his memory is to practice what he taught, put it into practice, both for Sangha and laity. And indeed, many people have been doing that since he passed away, which is why probably we're all here today. If you think about it, somebody who passed away 33 years ago is still being, or their memory is still being honoured and cherished, not in a sort of an occasional ritual or ceremony, but on a daily basis, following teachings, the system of training we call it, the Dhamma, the Vinaya, that we inherited or received from Luang Por Chah. That is going on all the time, right till today, and I would imagine for many days, weeks, years to come. And that's our good fortune. So it's something I think of regularly in my life, and it seems to have a good effect on your heart when you recollect your good fortune, both of having faith in the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, and meeting Sangha who practice well, and listening to them, respecting them, and trying to follow their good example and follow the teachings they give. Not always easy, as we know. Practicing the Dhamma can be challenging, but it's our good fortune that we have the opportunity to practice. And many people say, they say like Luang Por Chah kind of made the Dhamma for them come alive, made it meaningful, made it accessible, made it seem like something they could practice, whether as Sangha, monks, nuns, or as lay people. Because I know many people begin their kind of exploration and practice of the Buddha Dhamma with the view that maybe it's kind of out of date. And many of us, and I thought this too, when I first came across Buddha's teachings, obviously I wasn't brought up in a Buddhist family, I had the feeling that it's really good stuff, but maybe no longer practiced in the world, and it's just, I'll never find anyone who really understands what the Buddha taught or any enlightened people. That was my initial thought. So for myself, I was very lucky. Of all places, I saw Luang Por Chah for the first time when I was about 16 years old on TV. So we shouldn't knock technology too much. It can be a very useful thing. I saw they didn't have digital technology in those days, or not widely, but we have TV, and we had a company still going today, just called the BBC. But they sent a crew to Ajahn Chah's monastery back in the 1970s, 1977 if I remember, and made a documentary about Ajahn Chah's life, teachings and life in the monastery, which you can still see today, the mindful way. And you can even still see some of the monks who were in that documentary on video. Some of them have been here today, Luang Por Liam. You can see a very young Ajahn Piek being interviewed. You can see a very young Luang Por Anan, looking very young, like a schoolboy. And a few other teachers, living and practicing with Luang Por Chah were in that video. But for me, the impression it made was the sense of the link back to the time of the Buddha, that Ajahn Chah himself seemed to fully understand, fully comprehend what the Buddha taught, was living it, practicing it. You might even say breathing it was the impression I got. But living in the jungle, so not easily accessible, especially in those days, in the 70s. I lived in London, so the thought of going to the Thai jungle to become a Buddhist monk, immediately arose in my mind, but it was a while before I could really see it as a practical, realistic possibility. In those days, there was still a Vietnam War going, but then what's changed? There's still wars today. So that's obviously the ways of the world are always uncertain, and sometimes you do have conflicts, disputes, wars, economic problems, social problems, natural disasters and so on. That's nothing new. We've had them in the time of the Buddha, we have them now. But seeing Luang Por Chah and his Sangha on the TV and hearing him speak, explaining what we have to do in very down-to-earth, practical terms, was a great eye-opener and inspiration to me. It gave me great faith. You might say it planted a seed, so that those Buddhist teachings I'd already been reading suddenly became much more accessible and something that I could even consider doing, meditating, or even becoming a Buddhist monk. So that was my good fortune. But coming down till today, 2025, the teachings are so accessible, partly through the efforts of the Katanyuta group, but also many, many other avenues, monasteries, teachers, publications, and of course the internet. They're just available now, very easily available. You might call it mainstream, and that's one thing I've noticed in my lifetime. It's gone from being a minority on the edge of society, meaning Buddhists, to being mainstream, to being something that people give some value to. I mean, if you're not a Buddhist, you might not fully understand Buddhism, but at least it's sort of recognized much more than before. And the opportunities to practice are there now, and this is a good example of it. So Ajahn Chah, we're remembering and recollecting him because he's had a huge impact, particularly on the Buddhist community around the world, not just in northeast Thailand, where he started, but around the world. And here we are in KL, in Malaysia, and hundreds of people have come to remember him and hear teachings and recollections of him. And I imagine, again, that will just continue. The impact of Ajahn Chah may not be quite as amazing as that of the Buddha himself, but as a sāvaka, what we call a sāvaka, an enlightened disciple of the Buddha, certainly he started something that is still continuing, and like the wheel of the Dhamma, keeps turning. So it's with gratitude, Gatanyuta is gratitude, and then Gataweti is the wish to give something back. These are qualities that the Buddha said are hard to find in the world, but this is what we're displaying today, coming together. Our gratitude for Luang Por Chah, his life, his teachings, and then for his students who have also carried on his teachings the best way that they can. It's something to be happy about, grateful for. And we often share merit as Buddhists, don't we? We say we share merit with our parents, grandparents, people who passed away. I don't think Ajahn Chah needs our merit. But we can express our delight in the Dhamma that he taught, the way that he practiced, and we can show our appreciation for him through our own practice. That's the correct thing to do, I would say. So again, that's what's brought us together, this love of the Dhamma and love of Luang Por Chah, however much we can know him or understand him. And you might, as I imagine most of you never met him, you might feel, oh, I'm too late, I can't listen to Ajahn Chah's Dhamma live anymore, I can't ask him questions, I can't go and make offerings to him or practice meditation with him. And sure, you might say that's a loss, but you look at the Sangha, this is a living Sangha, a living tradition, and everybody points out, since Luang Por Chah passed away, his Sangha continues to grow. There's more monks now in his Sangha than when he was alive. More monasteries, more branch monasteries, hundreds of monasteries around Thailand and indeed around the world. Monks, nuns, laymen, laywomen, probably you might say in the millions. There's definitely not a small number of people. So it's still very much a living tradition, and we're kind of preserving something of Ajahn Chah in the way we practice. Not only the quotes, everyone loves to quote Ajahn Chah, different things he said, and that is important, and there are so many. Where would you start? Just like the Buddha, there's so many teachings the Buddha gave. If you were asked what is your favorite teaching of the Buddha, it might be hard to actually pin one particular teaching down, because they're all given at different occasions to different people, different situations. Ajahn Chah is much the same. There are those quotes from Ajahn Chah that when the time is right, they really mean something. And quite often they'll pop up, like literally on your screen, your feed, on your digital screen, but quite often just into your memory, particularly if you meditate and you've read or heard his teachings. Or sometimes other people quote them. Everyone is walking around with T-shirts with Ajahn Chah quotes on these days. So you may just be walking behind somebody who's telling you that if you attach a lot, you'll suffer a lot. So if you keep your eyes open, you'll notice, oh, there's Ajahn Chah teaching us again. So Ajahn Chah is kind of living on, particularly through the Sangha and the way they practice, all the things they do, but then also through the books and through the laity as well. And we shouldn't forget that, because obviously this event has particularly been arranged for the benefit of you, the laity. You are part of Ajahn Chah's community, students of Ajahn Chah. If you have faith in his wisdom, his teachings, in the Sangha as they are now today, then you're part of that community too. And Ajahn Chah was very inclusive in his teachings. He certainly didn't sort of say only monks or nuns can practice and no one else can. Not at all. You know, the flavour and the message you get from his teachings is that the practice is for everyone. It's open. And that's how it should be, and that's how Buddhism is. It's open to everyone. But of course we have to practice. And that's the hard one, making the jump from just liking it, believing in it. You know, I believe Ajahn Chah was enlightened. I believe Ajahn Chah was a wise monk. Okay, probably many people would agree with that. But making the jump to, because Ajahn Chah was a wise teacher, now I'm going to do what he said. You know, as soon as it's time to meditate, you know, while I'm speaking, probably you can all sit there and listen, and maybe you like what I say, maybe you don't, I don't know. But if I stop and say, we're now going to do 1 hour meditation, maybe you all start wriggling in your seats. But that would have been a very Ajahn Chah thing. He actually, just through his skill in using situations, he quite often got people to meditate much longer than they would have done themselves. He was very good at that, getting people to push themselves a little bit more than usual. And that's also not only do we have the quotes that people love to give, but also the stories about when they had to sit all night or go without something, or push themselves a little bit more in some situation. That seems to be the flavour of his teaching. But it's very difficult to describe it as a kind of a system or a technique. And nowadays everyone wants a technique. They say, what is the Ajahn Chah technique? Ajahn Chah was just teaching what the Buddha taught. The Noble Eightfold Path as a way of practice, cultivating those 8 different qualities, factors, realizing the Four Noble Truths, all the usual things that Buddhist masters and teachers give all over the world. Nothing really unusual, but it was his wisdom and mindfulness and just his compassion that brought out the best in him in teaching other people. That's what people sort of often remember. He was a very good teacher because he always seemed to be right there in touch with what was going on whenever it was, whatever it was, and being able to address the person, the situation with good Dhamma teachings at that time. So he didn't necessarily have a particular technique. I mean, some people nowadays will say, oh, Luang Por Chah taught letting go. And that's a very vague term and has been misused over and over again through the years. If we let go, we'd probably just go home now. Letting go can mean many things, can't it? Or when you're angry, I just let go and scold the person I don't like. So there's many ways of letting go, not always that wise. But that wouldn't be what Ajahn Chah taught. Anyone who's lived with him and lived in his Sangha would know, well, that may be a tool, a reflection that you do use quite often, but it has to be used carefully with wisdom, as all the different practices are. They're all the same. I remember one Western monk asked Ajahn Chah, where should we begin the practice of Dhamma? And he said, the practice begins with wisdom. Panya is the Buddhist word for wisdom. And the monk was confused because most people see wisdom as the end of the practice, the final result, the understanding, the insight that frees you from suffering. That's what we're aiming for, but most people see that as the kind of final thing you gain through your practice. But Ajahn Chah said it's the beginning of the practice. So maybe that means you have to go off and suddenly read a pile of books quickly to get a lot of wisdom so you can start practicing. But I'm not sure that that's what he meant. In that situation, what he was referring to, because there is a bit more explanation later, he said, you need the wisdom to see the value of keeping the precepts, which is wisdom, isn't it? Just knowing these precepts, whether you're a lay person keeping 5 precepts or trying to keep 8 precepts, or you're a Buddhist monk or nun keeping the Vinaya, many precepts, there has to be something in you that motivates you to do that, because it's not something anyone can force on you. And you may temporarily be able to force someone to keep the 5 precepts, but that's not how the Buddha taught. So you need wisdom, you need some understanding that this is going to work, this is going to help me, this is going to improve my life. So Ajahn Chah's technique, then you could say, is wisdom. You need wisdom. And then sort of people, as I said, they're sort of frustrated. What do I do to get wisdom? Read more books, listen to more talks. And of course, that can be one good way of gaining some wisdom. But we also need to think or reflect on the teachings and see how they apply to us as a human being, wherever we are in our life, whether we're young, we're old, wherever we are, whatever our situation is. We need to reflect or bring into our heart and contemplate. So then a lot of people say, well, Ajahn Chah's technique is contemplation, bringing up the Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha, trying to understand them and apply them in daily life, which is not a bad reflection, not a bad conclusion from that, but maybe that's not the whole practice, but it is certainly a very useful way of looking at it. We need to use our minds, and we all got a mind, to understand the Dhamma. But of course there are many levels or depths to understanding. And again, one of Ajahn Chah's amazing skills was he could apply the Dhamma and present it to people from all backgrounds, on all levels. So it could be, he could give a Dhamma talk, this is my experience anyway, he could give a Dhamma talk and there could be people sitting listening to that Dhamma talk who are already very advanced in their practice, what we call Arya Pugalas, noble ones, listening and just need a little tweak of their understanding to just get beyond some particular mental defilement or attachment they have. They just need a little nudge, a little correction of their view maybe, because they're already very advanced. But then at the same time, the same situation, the same talk, there could be someone who's totally new to Buddhism and they'll also get something very useful out of the talk. For myself, when I first went to live with the Sangha of Ajahn Chah, I came right at the end of his life. He was alive, but I came in 1983, he passed away in 1992, so I only caught him at the end of his life. But what I wanted to do was learn his Dhamma, so I spent a lot of time translating his teachings from Thai into English. Just as you've heard today, some of the talks have been translated for you. I spent a lot of time doing that, and I found that that gave me an insight into what he was teaching. Not the whole insight, I mean, living teachers are also, other monks, lay people around me, they would also give me many teachings and guidelines in the practice. But I got a lot from listening and translating. And I realized, you translate a talk of Ajahn Chah, when you begin, you're a newcomer, so you're learning all these phrases, and they make some sense and they're very useful. But then sometimes I go back a year or two later, or even 5 or 10 years later, just get a whole new depth of Dhamma or understanding from the same talk. And I realized, Dhamma partly is where you're at when you're listening, isn't it? We can say Ajahn Chah is a really good teacher, and he was. So wise, so clear in his mind, and so compassionate, because it takes a lot of time and effort to teach. But for the listener or the student living with him, listening to him, practicing with him, it would depend on them as well. Where are they at? And sometimes we're ready for the Dhamma, sometimes we're not. And we have a lot of resistance, and certainly Ajahn Chah's students, if you ask them over the years, there'll be people who have had their moments resisting the teacher, maybe even been totally fed up and angry with Ajahn Chah. It's not all love and respect. But one thing I remember, this is something I was told very early on, is that if you do get angry with the teachings or the teacher, it won't last, because as soon as you think about it, who are you angry with and why, very quickly you'll see it's not the teacher's fault, it's not the teacher to blame, it's yourself, your own wrong thinking, your attachment, you're not getting what you want maybe, and the teacher is pointing that out to you so you can go beyond it. And this would happen over and over again. So if the teacher makes you sit meditation longer than you would like, and you have a bit of pain in your legs and you're wriggling around, or you stay up later than you would like and you can't go to sleep when you want, or you're not getting the food or the comfort or the this or the that or the recognition, the appreciation that you want, this is nothing to blame the teacher about. He's just pointing it out to you by maybe just presenting a situation where you can reflect. So he was very good at that, and it wouldn't be all bed of roses for him or for the people living with him. If you ask Lumpur Sumedho what it was like when he first went to stay with Ajahn Chah, the first thing Ajahn Chah said to him was, you can stay here and study and practice, but I won't spoil you. There's already setting the picture. It's like, oh okay. You don't know what you're getting in for then. And especially in the early days, his monastery was very poor. He was a great teacher, and there certainly were many people who attended the monastery, lots of monks, lots of lay people visited, but the monastery was quite poor. When I first went there, the food you ate was all put together in your bowl. You didn't even choose your own food. It was spooned into your bowl for you. And you just had to take what you got, like it or not. And to be honest, his monastery had a reputation throughout Thailand, or certainly in the Sangha of Thailand, the worst food. And it would be a place that monks would not go to because they were afraid of the food. Obviously things have changed these days. Lumpur Liam is very kind and there's plenty of good food. But that was the reputation. And they would say food is not delicious at Wat Pah Pong, and sleep is not delicious at Wat Pah Pong. That was another one. The very first time I stayed there as a layman, I was in the sala. When you're a layman, you don't get put into a night like now we're staying in hotels and nice rooms with beds and everything. You slept on the floor, the concrete floor of the meditation hall, with mosquitoes buzzing around your head all night, on a simple mat, no mattress, next to a skeleton. And I slept next to a skeleton. There's one other layman there, and he went in and he put his mat down near the skeleton. And it's like, oh, I don't want to sleep next to a skeleton, because there was a skeleton hanging up in a glass cabinet. So I'm moving to the other side. So he moved over to the other side. What he didn't realize is there was a skeleton there as well. There's two either side, kind of protecting the meditation hall. Protecting it from what? Protecting it from delusion. Because, as Ajahn Chah said, skeletons are everywhere. I can see hundreds of them now. And he said, practice until you can see it. Everyone is a skeleton. It's just we don't like to think of it in that way, this human body. But that was the truth. But when you're new, you sleep next to a skeleton and sleep is not delicious. You sleep a few hours, you wake up and that's it. You just don't want to fall asleep. Scared of ghosts, scared of this, scared of that. So that was his monastery. Sleep wasn't great, food wasn't great, the furnishings weren't great, skeleton on the wall. That was what introduced you to the Dhamma. Perhaps I was lucky because I travelled from London to Thailand. I don't know how far it is, 10,000 kilometres or something, I don't know. So I thought, if I don't like it, it's a long way to go back. And I think Ajahn Chah and his teachings and the way he set the Sangha out, certainly for the Western monks, the foreign monks, he had that in mind. It's like, they're going to just have to put up with all of this. Because they can't, it's very difficult to just walk away. It's a long way to go. The Thai monks, not very far to go home. So some of them didn't last so long. I think some of the Western monks didn't last so long. But for myself, it was always, I'm going to have to learn about this, how to live in this situation. But what I found was that the Dhamma that he taught, and translating his talks first of all, and then reflecting on them, bringing them inwards, that was the way I survived, using the Dhamma. And that, as far as I understand, that's what Ajahn Chah encouraged. Keeping the sila, say for a monk, is the Vinaya, and then learning the Dhamma, learning it, and then reflecting on it, contemplating it, until you understand it. And as you understand it, your mind goes more quiet because you're seeing things more correctly once you apply your mind to the Dhamma. But obviously that takes time and you have to go through some bumps and bruises along the way, which provides lots of food for Dhamma talks. And we even used to say that, like when I was an Anagarika or a novice, sometimes somebody would have a difficult time, maybe they'd catch some strange illness where they had fever that put them on their back for 7 days and no real medicine or no way of really treating it. And they'd sort of be lying there sweating, in pain, uncomfortable, miserable, and a friend would come and see them in their kuti in the forest, in their hut in the forest, and say, how are you doing? And say, oh, the head hurts, the body's in fever, I'm just lying on my back looking at a tin roof all day long. It's pretty bad. And they say, well, one day you'll become a big teacher like Luang Por Chah and you'll have a story to tell everyone. So, oh, okay. So you can always put a positive spin on suffering, I guess. It becomes the food of the story. But that's how Ajahn Chah's Sangha, and that's how he taught. He just took very ordinary situations but turned them into Dhamma. First he did it himself through his teachings, and then he encouraged us to do it for ourselves. And you can do it for yourself as well. I mean, if you are talking about quotes of Ajahn Chah, perhaps one that is very applicable to everyone, everywhere, most of the time, I'd say. If you're suffering, it's because you're thinking in the wrong way. Your thoughts are wrong. Somewhere or other you're going wrong in your understanding, or maybe just the fact you're thinking too much, or thinking in the wrong way, a negative way, or whatever. It's such a useful little teaching, and that's one he used quite a lot. If you're suffering, it's because you're thinking wrong. So you have to come back to yourself, don't you? And this is entirely in line with the Buddha's teaching, except for it's just a very practical way of applying the Buddha's teaching. You could be at home, you could be at work, you could be in the monastery, it doesn't matter. It's not limited to time or space or place. If you're suffering, you must be thinking wrong. So say you are suffering, you're angry, you're worried, you're confused, you're miserable in some way, you're suffering. Instead of just indulging it and getting stuck there, maybe bring up that question, where am I going wrong in my thinking? And that's what brings you closer to Ajahn Chah. You might call that the Ajahn Chah inside, the internal Ajahn Chah. We know Ajahn Chah on the outside, the pictures, the talks, the monasteries, all of that, and that's helpful as well. But what I think he was encouraging all the time was for us to go inwards into our own practice, and not just to rely on him, but just maybe get a starter from him. But then you have to learn for yourself, don't you? How to deal with your own stress, your own suffering, your own confusion. And a lot of it is just you're thinking in the wrong way. So how do you address that? How do you deal with that? Well, you have to pay more attention, don't you? And that's why, again, another part of Ajahn Chah's system or technique, for want of a better word, is being present in the moment, being mindful, paying attention, because then you can learn. So he would say, if you want wisdom, which I think we all do, we all want to be wiser, to know things, to understand things, you need to pay attention. It's not something you can just gain from a book alone. You have to bring your mind inwards and bring your attention inwards to really get to the real truth of existence and the way we are. This body, this mind, as it is in the present moment. We have to pay attention, we need mindfulness, and then we need to reflect on things if we're to understand, and if we're to change our thinking for the better. Either give up wrong thinking or at least alter it to improve it. We need to do that, and so that's another bit of Ajahn Chah, this sort of constant coming back to the present moment. What are you doing? What are you thinking? What are you saying? Over and over again you get that, not just from him, but from the other Sangha members. When I did first stay at Wat Nombapong, Ajahn Chah's monastery, that was something that I constantly was both being admonished, meaning other people were reminding me about, and also something I noticed. Like, it was quite hard, like as I said, food wasn't great, climate wasn't great, didn't sleep a lot, sometimes there was hard work to do, sometimes it was too hot, too cold. You wouldn't believe it, you could actually be too cold in Thailand, because when I was in Anagarika, you just have this one little piece of white cloth over your shoulder. You had to come to a morning meeting at 3 a.m. and you'd watch Ajahn Pasano, who will give a talk later. He was the abbot of Wat Nana Chat in those days. He would sit there very serene and solid. And but as an Anagarika, you just have a little white piece of cloth over your shoulder, one bare shoulder, and it could be down to like 10 degrees or something. You'd sit there freezing. So you could be too cold, too hot, whatever. But I learned, you have to bring your attention back and watch your mind and see where your suffering is. And if you start to complain internally, well, that becomes a mood, that becomes suffering. And then what happens next is you generally start complaining to someone near you. You say, oh, isn't it cold, or I hate the cold, or whatever. But the monks would always sort of look at you with a kind of mature but slightly sort of sympathetic kind of look, and they're sort of saying, yes, it's cold, don't think about it too much, or don't complain too much. And I noticed the monks, they never complained. They get up early, they stay up late, one meal a day, cold, hot, hard work, long hours of meditation, simple living conditions. They never complained. And complaints became very out of place. I could go to Ajahn Chah's monastery and live there, and for days on end you wouldn't hear a single complaint. True, I didn't speak Thai at first, so maybe there were some complaints in the background, I don't know. But I don't think there were many, because if you're living with people, you get to know them. And the monks never complained. Like, I remember one time we stayed up all night meditating, and so by the morning you're exhausted, you go on alms round into the village, come back, eat your meal. And then this was a particular day, there was a building project. Luang Por Liam was leading a building project to improve the monastery, and not much money available, so sometimes the monks would help. And I just said, there's all these monks working, none of them slept last night. How do you do it? And he just said, well, you have faith in the teacher and you're practicing and you just get on with it and you don't think too much about it. The job needs to be done. I said, oh, okay. No one complained. Whatever happened, no one complained. A friend of mine, his father died. Sooner or later our loved ones die. And the news was read out at the mealtime. Luang Por Liam received a letter, he passed it to the next monk, and the next monk read it out. Oh, so-and-so, your father just passed away. Okay. It's almost like being in a kind of prison of a war camp. You sort of, okay, he died. It's not that people didn't care, of course they cared, and they were very warm and supportive, but things were just very simple and very open, very honest, and people didn't complain. They put up with things, so many things, illness, hardship. Why? Because they had faith, and they realized complaining doesn't help, does it? Doesn't make your mind peaceful, doesn't solve the problem, complaining. What you need to do is look and see, well, what is the problem, what is the solution, what can we do in this case? And quite often there's nothing you can do, is it, other than endure. So people never complained, even though it could be quite hard, and you might think people would complain. They didn't, because they were in training. They were coming back to watch their mind. And this is, you might say, Ajahn Chah's technique. You come back to watch your mind at all times, because the Dhamma is there teaching you at all times. Even one of his books that Katanyuta group probably published is Everything is Teaching Us. Every last thing is teaching us if you make it a teaching. Doesn't mean to say you have to go out, giving talks or something. It just means noticing the way things are from your own body and mind in the present moment. So to do that, you need to pay attention. So Ajahn Chah is always getting people to pay attention to themselves and to the situation. Sometimes you need to pay attention, be mindful as you interact with the world around you. Sometimes it's just you're on your own and you're lost in some thought, some mood. And he was very good at getting people out of that so they see themselves. Lots of people, really their personal experiences, personal reflections for them to say, but a few that have been shared with me over the years, one that seems quite pertinent. There was one monk who came from another monastery to live with Ajahn Chah, and he was already a scholar, so he was an expert in the Buddhist texts. And that's quite common nowadays. People put a lot of effort into their study. They learn a lot, know a lot. They can explain the Pali, the different terms, and that's a useful resource for the world. But the danger is if you don't meditate and haven't brought it into your mind and seen it for yourself in your own mind, is that you tend to attach to the words and the knowledge with a sense of self. And it's not just Buddhists, obviously. Anyone in the world can do this. You have some knowledge, some skills, some success in one area, and that becomes who you are. So this monk was very proud. And at the beginning, he didn't realize it. So he's proud, had a great conceit. Nowadays, we use the word ego, but the Buddhist term is ditthi-mana. He had this self-view and conceit. And he'd walk around the monastery very proud. And when I first met him, he was like that. He's going to look down at you a little bit, because he knew a lot. But with this pride, he also had a lot of anger, because he thought he knew better than anyone else. But he was still attached to the idea that he knew better than anyone else, a view, an idea, a self-view. And Ajahn Chah would always be looking for ways to get people to see where they were attaching in this way. And this is the hardest thing of all. We all know about letting go of the desire for a cup of coffee or to sleep or something, but to let go of self-view, we're talking now about the hardest thing for human beings to see, and then the hardest thing to let go of. But this monk had it, and he was there to learn to meditate with Ajahn Chah. That's why he went there to Ajahn Chah's. And he said he had this view, I know a lot. I'm coming from a place where I have lots of lay disciples, devotees, and they look after me very well, support me very well. I could just stay there, but I realized I'm missing something. And he wanted to learn with Ajahn Chah in the forest. So he, all credit to him, he gave up a lot of comfort to come and live in a very difficult situation in the forest with no real comforts, no recognition, he wasn't being spoiled. So he came there. but he still hadn't fully seen himself. So Ajahn Chah was looking for ways to point this out. And Ajahn Chah had so many ways, but number one, he'd get to know that person, their character, the way they thought, the way they acted. And we believe sometimes this was on the level of his meditation. He'd just know someone's mind. It would seem he'd know very quickly, very sharp, where they're at, what their problem was, where their suffering was. So he seemed to work that out with this monk. And the first thing he started teaching him about was conceit, this view, I know the Dhamma. And he'd listen to Ajahn Chah and he'd always be judging Ajahn Chah, saying, Ajahn Chah doesn't know as much Dhamma as me. I know the Pali, I know all the terms. Ajahn Chah doesn't. So I maybe am better than Ajahn Chah. And he admitted this later, but at the time he couldn't see it. So that's quite a strong, what we call a mental defilement. So Ajahn Chah has to deal with that. And that means he has to be tolerant of someone who's very kind of arrogant, bossy in his monastery, living with him, always looking at him critically. And I'm not saying once, it's like day after day. You have to put up with that. And that's the compassion of Ajahn Chah, all these different characters. Then he has his wisdom. How can I help this person see themselves, get the mind to turn around, looking inwards, rather than looking out at the world and comparing with the world, I'm better than them and all this. So there's one day the monk was always sitting, listening to Ajahn Chah teach, thinking, is Ajahn Chah enlightened or not? So at the end of Ajahn Chah's teaching, he just asked the monk, he said, so am I enlightened or not? And the monk was like, oh, that's exactly what I was thinking. How did he know? And so Ajahn Chah is just pointing out a very practical application of the mind. Of course, we learn knowledge, we read, we learn, we listen and remember, and that's good. But now Ajahn Chah was saying, I actually know what your mind is like, what's going on. And that really, he said that really went in deep for him. It's like, oh, this guy, he really knows. And he's embarrassed. It's like, oh, he's caught me out. So that helped. But he wasn't done with the anger yet. The conceit started to drop from that day. The ego started to go down. But the anger was still there, still a bit puffed up. And he said, yeah, a lot of the monks didn't like me in the beginning because I'd walk around, kind of look down my nose at them, and I'd often say negative things about them. So another time, Ajahn Chah used a simple situation. An old villager came to visit him, and in those days, Wat Pah Pong, the roads and pathways were not well developed. So people sometimes got lost walking around the jungle before they got out of the monastery to go back to their village. And a lot of people came on foot. So this man came on foot to visit Ajahn Chah. He had a conversation with Ajahn Chah. And then he had to go home and he couldn't work out his way, and it was getting dark, and in those days there's no electricity, no lights. So he's stumbling around, so he asked Ajahn Chah, which is the way back to my village? And Wat Pah Pong is surrounded by many villages, so you could literally go in any direction and there'll be a village. But of course it might not be your village. So, which way to my village? Ajahn Chah said, oh, okay, you have to go past that hut over there, which is where the monk with the problems of conceit and arrogance and anger lived. You go past that hut, and then you go take the path beyond it through the forest and keep going, and you'll get home. But when you go past that hut, just take a pause, take a moment and check, because that's where we keep our pet tiger. And this is the old days. You say pet tiger, that means a tiger, and it means it can kill you. And they did kill people. So the man was like, what? So he starts nervously going, and he goes past the hut. Pet tiger, where is it? So he didn't want to just walk past. He walked around the hut a few times, checking, where is it? Maybe it's lying down there in that corner. And the monk is upstairs watching this man wander around his hut. So he came down, he was intrigued. And he said, why are you walking around my hut? And he said, I'm going home, but Ajahn Chah told me to watch out for the tiger here. I'm just checking where it is. And then the man looked up, and this monk on his arm, he had a big tattoo of a tiger. And the monk knew instantly, Ajahn Chah, he's got me again. the man went on his way, but the monk is like, after that, he's like, because in Thailand, often you call someone a tiger, it means they get really angry. They have the anger of a tiger, they roar. So he knew Ajahn Chah now he's calling me a tiger, I'm angry. The day before, he's pointing out my conceit. So he said, within a few months of living with Ajahn Chah, his ego and his sort of arrogance just sort of crumbled down to a much more modest, ordinary level, and then he's ready to learn, ready to meditate, ready to learn the Dhamma. All of us have to do that in one way or another, but you have to learn how to reflect back on yourself, don't you? That's the compassion of a teacher. If they have a way, any kind of wisdom or method that they can help you to see yourself, that's such a benefit, such a blessing. But at the time, you might not see it. I mean, you don't see it as a blessing if someone's pointing out that you're angry or you're attached in some way. You resist, don't you? You say, who are you to tell me? You complain. But it's actually a blessing, isn't it, when a teacher points this out? We learn it from our parents when we're young. So, your mum and dad say, don't do this, go there, don't do that, don't do this, you must do this. And for a while we kind of accept it, usually, not always. And then you grow up, but you don't want that anymore. Once you're an adult, you don't want everyone telling you what to do, where to go. So then we start resisting, and that's when we form this strong sense of self, you might call it ego. But when you encounter a teacher like Ajahn Chah, they can help in that way. They can't do it for you, but they can help point out the suffering of this holding on to self-view, which for me, and I think many others, this is the crux or the center of Buddhist practice, is to help you see that attachment to your self-view is the cause of your suffering. But you have to be able to look inwards and see that. And it could be the suffering in the family, the workplace, the monastery, wherever. But it will be this sense of self-view that is feeding it. Or, as it comes out, you just say, the wrong thinking, the negative thinking, the complaining, the worry, the greed, the confusion, the delusion. There's many ways it shows itself. But this is what Ajahn Chah was very good at, showing and helping people to see in one way or another. And that really leaves its imprint for the rest of your life, maybe. You really learn and improve, and sometimes very dramatically. You change as a person for the better, and you don't forget that. That's something that stays with you for life. And so then you have eternal gratitude to the teacher, which means you keep practicing, having events like this, or in your daily life, carrying on with your meditation, keeping precepts, offering dana, all the things we do. You get the inspiration to keep doing that, partly because you remember the teacher. So many of the older generation, you think of Ajahn Chah, straight away you know what that means. It means something to you. So you get energy from it, you get a reminder of how to practice, what you have to do. You get many things. You can sometimes get samadhi. Just remembering Ajahn Chah, your mind can go into samadhi. You might call it sanganusati, where you recollect the teacher and the qualities of the teacher. And just very quickly your mind calms down, settles down. Or it could be dhammanusati, recollection of the Dhamma. So you hear a Dhamma talk from Ajahn Chah, or a recording, or read a book, and your mind gathers together and goes into samadhi straight away. It won't always be like that, but these are some of the experiences you don't forget. Or just visiting the monastery, like maybe next month some of you might be going to Ajahn Chah's monastery for the anniversary of his death, 16th of January, where we have a meditation retreat, teachings, and people go to practice in large numbers still today. So for me, I just walk in the monastery, Wat Nombapong, and the mind just sort of goes quiet straight away. Something there. Partly it's memory, I guess, but partly it's something there, kind of a pleasant, peaceful atmosphere that pervades the event or the place. Really, it's any time of year you can go there, but that often is when people do visit. Or you go to the Chedi, where his relics are. You bow, you meditate, you chant, and you get this very peaceful state of mind, remembering the teacher. And quite often you learn things, if only how to endure a bit of pain or discomfort, and usually a bit more than that. So I think my time has run out now, but just giving you a few recollections, partly personal recollections and partly just talking in general about Ajahn Chah and his teachings. I certainly have no regrets becoming a student of his, living with him, practicing with him to this day. And even if he isn't alive, just following his teachings, following the Sangha, I really couldn't recommend a better way to live. So that's the talk today.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.